So we're right at the top of the hour, and I'm going to get started with our Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Great Stories Club Pilot Results webinar. I'm Lainey Castle from the ALA Public Programs Office and Project Director of the TRHT Great Stories Club. I'd like to welcome our speakers and thank them for joining us, including Gwendolyn Prowitz, Assistant Director in ALA's Office for Diversity, Literacy, and Outreach Services, Dominica McBride, Founder and CEO of Become, our third-party evaluator, and Alicia Anderson, Project Manager, also with Become. A couple of notes about our virtual classroom. Only our presenters have microphone access today, but you are welcome to type your questions or your comments into the chat box. To send a chat message, move your cursor to the bottom of the Zoom window and click chat. If you have any technical issues, we ask you to use the Q&A window to communicate with PPO staff. We have Samantha Oakley here assisting with that. You can send a message through the Q&A feature by moving your cursor to the bottom of the Zoom window and clicking on Q&A. Please don't put technical questions in the chat window, as they could be missed if that window is very busy. We'll respond to your technical questions as quickly as possible. Note, this session will be recorded, so if you would like to review any information, you may do so via the archived version that we will send out a little later today. Thank you to all of you for joining us. In addition to our presenters and technical support, we're also sharing this Zoom classroom, both now and via the archived session that others will access soon, by a few different groups of stakeholders who are involved with the TRHT Great Stories Club. We were very excited to invite members of the project implementation team, the literature scholars and librarians who developed our themes and our reading lists, our national advisory group who provided a sounding board and communication support when the project first came together, staff from the 25 libraries that led our pilot efforts in 2018, staff from the 70 libraries that will implement the new TRHT Great Stories Club series beginning at the end of this month, and representatives from the organizations that have supported our efforts in a variety of different ways. Those include Everyday Democracy, the Federation of State Humanities Councils, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. I recognized a lot of names in the participant list. We're so appreciative of the contributions that each one of you has made to this project and our work. We're grateful that you're taking the time to engage with our evaluation efforts, and we're looking forward to getting your feedback both after this presentation as well as in the days ahead. Here's a quick overview of our agenda, which I hope we'll cover in about 50 minutes, leaving time at the end for your questions and feedback. I'll start by providing a quick overview of the TRHT Great Stories Club project. As you all probably know by now, the TRHT GSC is a project conducted by the ALA Public Programs Office in collaboration with the Office for Diversity, Literacy, and Outreach Services, ODLOS. It's supported by a grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. It is ALA's effort to support truth, racial healing, and transformation through libraries, and it builds on ALA's longstanding Great Stories Club program model to do so. Through the project, we're using library outreach efforts, thematic book collections, and curated support materials, including discussion questions and racial healing circle prompts to connect to the books, to engage young adults in relationship building, meaningful stories and storytelling, deep listening, and narrative change. With grounding in the humanities, the Great Stories Club has a longstanding goal of respecting and nurturing the intellectual lives and contributions of the young people who are participating in a way that affects how they view themselves. With support and guidance from the Kellogg Foundation and their amazing consulting team, the TRHT utilizes a racial healing circle methodology to build deeper connections between program participants and the books and ideas they're exploring. The evaluation report that you'll hear about in just a few minutes explores the program's 2018 pilot activity. As our evaluation efforts with Become move ahead, we're focusing on 2 new rounds of the TRHT Great Stories Club. In 2019, we selected 70 libraries to implement one of our 2 newly developed series. Those themes and their reading lists are on the screen. Finding Your Voice highlights the necessity and power of young people speaking up against racism and injustice despite challenges, social pressure, and even the threat of bigger dangers. Deeper Than Our Skins is grounded in literature that can help us look beneath the surface of racism in America to reveal how the past is alive in the present. Both collections have been developed to inspire discussions about how to construct more equitable futures. Programs will be held with teens now through December of 2019. Become an ALA will gather information from these 70 libraries incrementally over the next 9 months, learning more as the work moves ahead. Under the TRHT umbrella, ALA has 2 more opportunities ahead before our Kellogg Foundation grant term ends in April 2020. We will accept applications for a final round of Great Stories Club grants from May 6th through July 15th, 2019. In August, we're going to select 35 libraries to participate, and their programs will run from October until March of 2020. Thanks to additional funding provided by the NEH, these will be fully supported TRHT GSC grants that include the materials to run a 4-book series, a programming grant of $1,200, and inclusion in a 2-day project orientation workshop. Also, we are offering 2 events during the upcoming ALA annual conference that both provide a 3-hour racial healing circle experience for those who are interested in learning more about the methodology championed by the Kellogg Foundation. The session is titled Beyond the Racial Stalemate, and it will be offered twice on Friday, June 21st as a ticketed event. It will be co-facilitated by 2 Kellogg-affiliated racial healing circle practitioners who have also been invaluable advisors and mentors throughout our project. If anyone would like to learn more about either opportunity, please contact Public Programs Office staff after the webinar. And now it's my pleasure to hand the microphone over to Gwendolyn from ALA Old Los.
Hi, thank you, Lainey. All right, I wanted to put this work, this project work that we've been partnering with the Public Programs Office on in a little bit of context with other work that our office does, as well as the larger institutional context of ALA. So the ALA Office for Diversity, Literacy, and Outreach Services mission is to support library and information science workers in creating all-inclusive spaces that serve and represent the entire community. To accomplish this, we decenter power and privilege by facilitating conversations around access and identity as they impact the profession and those we serve. We use a social justice framework in our office, and we're striving to create an association culture where equity, diversity, and inclusion are really incorporated into everybody's everyday work. All right, move ahead. In January of 2017, our ALA Executive Board, as well as our Council, approved equity, diversity, and inclusion as a 4th strategic direction in our strategic plan. This direction recognizes that equity, diversity, and inclusion impact all aspects of work among members of the association within the field of librarianship and within the community served by libraries. Within this equity, diversity, and inclusion strategic direction, we have 7 goals, many of which this project helps us meet. 2 that we felt were especially resonant were establishing resources and support so that libraries and librarians can be effective advocates for the inclusion of all individuals in the life of their community, and providing safe and respectable places, spaces for diverse voices and perspectives. And so then, moving on. We wanted to look kind of, this is how we saw this project fitting into the current landscape of what we're working on. We are delighted that we got the opportunity to join the Public Programs Office on the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Great Stories Club, and we're very grateful to the W.K. Kellogg Foundation for investing in racial justice and equity work more broadly, and in our collaboration. We feel it aligns really well with where we are right now with this emphasis on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and we wanted to chat a little bit about how we see some of these pieces fitting together. So the TRHT framework focuses on bringing about transformational and sustainable change to address the historic and contemporary effects of racism and to jettison the deeply held, often unconscious belief in a hierarchy of human value. Tied to that is that concept of narrative change and creating new and complex, complete narratives in the way we communicate to influence people's perspectives, perceptions, and behaviors towards one another, so that we can work effectively towards community-based change. As part of our larger institutional context, as I mentioned, we have our recent framework, which gives us that 4th strategic direction on equity, diversity, and inclusion, which has provided this association context where this work is very much seen as of value and intrinsic, and that's given extra support for us to extend some of the work of this project outward to our members, leadership, and staff through some of those upcoming activities that Lainey mentioned. And then, as I talked about, our mission is really to take the lead on equity, diversity, and inclusion in action, and looking at our work in literacy and outreach services. How do we do that? Making sure that people understand our social justice framework, so that we are talking about power dynamics when we're looking into things, so that we can acknowledge and work together collectively on addressing historical and institutional inequity. You'll hear more about the Public Programs Office, but what we're showing here is that the Great Stories Club model is already in place with having the library-led book clubs for underserved youth facing significant challenges. And when that process merged with the TRHT, it gave us the opportunity to work together towards creating more complete narratives to foster empathy, to transform how we see and interact with one another. And we're really excited about some of those intersections, particularly as they pertain to the library workforce and the development therein. Lainey and I would like to talk about a couple of related activities that are not necessarily tied to the pilot site evaluation, but which we feel are very important to how the project has impacted both the Public Programs Office and the Office for Diversity, Literacy, and Inclusions and our mission. So Lainey, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So as we began working on the TRHT Great Stories Club, ALA recognized an exciting opportunity to expand the national network of racial healing circle facilitators that have received training in the WKKF methodology. In addition to helping us reach our goals for the Great Stories Club by expanding access to practitioners in geographic areas without much representation, we also saw potential for the work in a variety of other library settings and circumstances, from work with staff teams, boards, and committees, to programs for campus communities and even the general public. Thus, ALA has presented two-day training workshops for new circle facilitators. One was held in March of 2019 in Chicago, and another in July of 2018 at Duke University. Our partner in both of these events has been the Association of American Colleges and Universities. They are another one of the Kellogg Foundation's TRHT National Sector partners. I'd like to share a quote from one of the librarians who recently attended our workshop last month. As a person of color and a product of immigrants, I have been at the receiving end of racial slurs and microaggressions. As a manager of paraprofessionals, I have heard and listened to too many occurrences that have affected my team and colleagues of color. My team is comprised completely of people of color, and as one of the very few persons of color in a position of power, library staff confide in me about racial tensions in the workplace. With this training, I hope to use the tools I learn to move beyond the wounds and conversations to reflective self-care, awareness, and empowerment. I would like to use the training with my team, library system staff, and with the public community. This personal statement provides a good example of the need, motivation, and possible applications for this work in library settings. In addition to the two-day workshops, we've offered a few other ways for library professionals to engage with the Racial Healing Circle methodology. Those include circles convened during the ALA annual conference and midwinter meeting, the Joint Conference of Librarians of Color, and an all-day event that engaged staff from 5 libraries and their partner organizations in North Carolina. In the days ahead, ALA will seek to provide more opportunities for support, apprenticeship, and practice for those who have undertaken this training. One way that we will do that is through the ALA EDI Speakers Bureau, which Odlos leads, and Gwendolyn will share a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Lainey. Yes, so our office recently launched the EDI Speakers Bureau. It's an online resource that highlights experts from the library profession who are available to speak on topics surrounding equity, diversity, and inclusion, to do staff development and training, as well as conference events. So the Speakers Bureau includes speakers' location, biography, areas of expertise, fees as applicable. Users may nominate speakers, or people may self-nominate to be listed on the website. All of the participants in the recent Racial Healing Circle Facilitation workshop did receive headshots as part of that event and have been invited to join the Speakers Bureau, and we hear that interest is high. So we are excited to increase the network of people available to help institutions looking to work on change. We are also very delighted to hear that through working on this project, our colleagues in the Public Programs Office have asked our office to provide trainings on implicit bias, intercultural communications, and microaggressions to some of the key working groups. The trainings will become part of the preparation for peer reviewers who select the projects for funding that PPO offers. Additionally, for future rounds of the Great Stories Club and similar projects, the training would be extended to the scholars and librarians who are working on book selection and content development. One of the things when we were reading the evaluation report that we were really pleased to see were the number of librarians who reported feeling that their relationships with the teens developed new levels of trust and authenticity through participating in this pilot. A core function of our office is to build continuing education opportunities for library workers to develop a foundational understanding of ourselves and our interactions needed to begin to identify and disrupt learned behaviors. We routinely develop workshops that explore cultural competency, implicit bias, cultural humility, privilege and power in the context of librarianship and the community served by libraries. So we really look forward to supporting PPO and growing these training resources and getting them out to even larger audiences of library professionals and scholars working on PPO's projects. I'd just like to conclude by thanking the Public Programs Office, the Kellogg Foundation, and all of you for joining us. We've really enjoyed the opportunity to join you in this important work.
Thank you, Gwendolyn, and thanks so much to Jody Gray and Kristen LaHerde in Odlos as well. The entire team in Odlos has been just an invaluable resource, an invaluable source of knowledge, support, and guidance, and all of us in the Public Programs Office appreciate your work and everything that you do so much.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to the evaluation report, which covers our TRHT GSC pilot. The pilot involved 25 sites, which consisted of 20 public libraries, 2 K-12 school libraries, 1 academic library, and 2 prison libraries from 19 states. Over a programming period of 5 months, the libraries and their partners, which included alternative schools, youth detention centers, and community-based organizations that serve youth, they together facilitated and hosted 211 programs. A total of 2,383 youth participated in these programs. To those of you here today who were part of that effort, we thank you for your collaboration. And now I'm pleased to turn things over to our independent evaluators with Become, who will discuss the pilot evaluation results, and I'll hand the microphone over to you, Alicia.
Thank you, Lainey, and hello, everybody. So we're going to discuss the findings from the pilot evaluation, and we're going to go through the project background, the purpose, methods, results, and recommendations. So by now you've probably seen our presentation on evaluation in general and culturally responsive evaluation, or CRE specifically. So we know that culturally responsive evaluation is facilitated through a lens of culture, context, and community with an overarching component of critical reflection. With the TRHT GSC pilot evaluation, we know that marrying the goals of truth, racial healing, and transformation with the goals of the Great Stories Club, the program is designed to confront the detrimental impacts of systemic and structural inequity on people of color through a lens of literature, library science, and learning, and it focuses on high-need youth. The truth, racial healing, and transformation seeks to jettison the belief in a hierarchy of human value, thus creating an environment that is more conducive to the health and well-being of youth. So with this in mind, a culturally responsive evaluation was most appropriate for this pilot program. The components of the pilot program included facilitated book discussions and racial healing circles, partnerships with community organizations, including schools, juvenile justice organizations, teen outreach organizations, work study programs, and capacity building for library project director, which included trainings and webinars. 3 books were selected for the TRHT GSC pilot. So the first one was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, a novel focused on the effects of police brutality and its impact on communities of color, shown through the psychological journey of an African-American female protagonist who loses a friend to murder by a police officer. There was Miss Marvel by G. Willow Wilson and Adrian Alfana, a graphic novel centered on a superhero that is a teenage Muslim female and how her powers and confidence unfold. and March by John Lewis, Adrian Aden, and Nate Powell, a graphic novel about the civil rights era, nonviolent training, and experience of overt and often violent racism shown through the life of John Lewis. So the questions that we sought to answer for the pilot evaluation were, was there capacity, support, and buy-in for narrative change and racial healing as part of the work of the pilot sites as it's related to the TRHT GSC project? And also, was there buy-in and capacity in a more general sense? So interest in pursuing racial healing facilitation or training and applying it in a non-GSC setting? What strategies, activities, processes, and content worked well or did not work well for supporting narrative change with participants? What, if any, impact did participating in the project have on the library's relationship with community organizations, their partner organizations, or others, if applicable? Was there support for narrative change or youth's ability to see themselves, their own stories, and their capacity for change within the structures of racial inequity, and how their perceptions of heroes and villains may have changed? And do sites generally plan to participate in the next round of grants? What are the factors driving their decisions? And then what recommendations did we have for the national implementation of the TRHT GSC? So we interviewed 11 library project directors, 3 racial healing facilitators, and 10 youth participants. We surveyed 3 library project directors and 9 community partners. We facilitated a focus group with 8 youth participants. We observed 2 program sessions, and we reviewed program documents from 22 sites. And we collected the data to assess the impact of sessions on students' understanding of narrative change, personal and structural racism, and human inequity, to understand how community partnerships are being utilized and functioning, to explore ways to improve how the TRHT GSC program works, and to determine how consistent the implementation of the program was across all sites. We use a mixed methods design for this evaluation, analyzing the interviews, focus groups, observations, and reflection logs for themes within and across the different groups of students, library project directors, racial healing facilitators, and community partners. And we did a quantitative analysis of surveys looking at types of responses, frequency, and percentages of certain responses as well. And the data were analyzed to answer the evaluation questions mentioned previously. So I will let Dominica McBride walk you through the results and recommendations.
So we learned a lot through this process. Thank you, Alicia. We learned that the program yielded some great results for participants, both on the levels of the young people who participated in the program and the level of the library project directors that were implementing the program. We also learned some significant lessons for implementing the TRHT GSC within libraries, as well as other types of institutions who might want to conduct racial healing work in their sites or in their communities. So this youth participant summed up the results quite well in saying it's like everyone is a piece of paper with 2 sides, and when there's enough ink on one side, the weight of it bleeds through to the other side, and that side is also changed. There are various things and components that went into the program that yielded different effects that we're about to go through. The first was around changes for youth. So part of the foundation for this type of program, that it was these book club discussions with people of color that were the protagonists and or writers of the books. And the first and one of the loudest and most profound outcomes that came that showed through was an increase in the love of reading for the young people. So this library project director said that all of the boys responding to the survey and saying and saying how they all read more now and enjoy it because of the club. We are so thrilled they got to participate and that through the course of the club, they have grown into readers. We have witnessed this firsthand, and it is affirming to have them acknowledge this as well. Another young participant said, "I gained my sense of loving to read back." And this renewed or sparked love of reading, we see that it is connected to the students being able to see themselves reflected in the book, to see themselves reflected in the characters, or see their life experiences reflected in what they're reading. Another great result that we saw in the program was this sense of expanded support and community that they felt. A lot of the students who entered into this program, who experienced the program, are coming from spaces, whether it's institutions or communities, where they experience isolation. So this library project director gave an example of what her students experience both before and during the program. So in the course of talking casually amongst themselves, I heard a student comment on how this book group really gave them a sense of community. I asked a few follow-up questions, asked what they meant, asked if it was something about this peer group or what. In the end, we talked about community in general and at the school in particular. What became clear is that the students in this particular program do not have a sense of community, and in fact, harbor a significant jealousy of other programs within the school that do have community. Almost all of them said what they liked about this group was that it gave them a place to come together and an opportunity to share diverse ideas with diverse people. Also, they got to feel that togetherness and have inside jokes. So as all of you probably know, the importance of having a sense of belonging in a community, for students who are often isolated, this is even more prevalent and even more impactful for them to experience this in the group. And this was not necessarily an intended outcome of the group, but was very much felt by many of the students. And part of the mediator for having this sense of community and sense of connection was creating a safe space where they felt that they can disclose sensitive topics and even traumatic experiences that they felt or that they have been through. One project director said, even in a very limited time, we only had an hour, they were able to get the kids to the point of saying that what hate they give to the world. It was powerful to hear them openly acknowledge their prejudices. It was also powerful to hear the student from the lowest socioeconomic background speak up loudly about how much discrimination she feels in her life, even while surrounded by her classmates. Other examples of some of the disclosures that students had were losing loved ones to suicide, opening up about their own sexual orientation for the first time, and even being a victim of sex trafficking. The key piece here that was foundational for creating a space where the students felt like they could disclose was creating that safe and brave space where all the students were encouraged to tell their stories, and they felt heard and they were reflected back in the group. So one of the intended outcomes where there were mixed results was around narrative change. We did not see evidence for significant narrative change with the youth participants. So narrative change, for example, is when somebody from a marginalized group, a person of color, starts to see their trauma or their experience, their life experience in the broader context of the structural racism that exists in this country. So instead of seeing everything as being personal to them, shifting a perspective and seeing that they have been put in a box to make certain decisions or to have limited opportunity to navigate in certain ways. or even to make the impact. So going from seeing themselves as potential victim to seeing themselves as potential change agent. One example of this explanation is our main character in the Hate U Give, Star. She went from being afraid to use her voice, given her experience, and went to being a very loud agent of change and using her voice and her feelings and her thoughts to try to change the structure and change the system. Another part of the movement towards narrative change is that they did have the reading materials which allowed them to start to talk about things around race, class, and identity for themselves and each other. The library project directors, however, did take steps in the direction around narrative change. They began to enhance self-awareness, and you who are on this call probably had some of these experiences yourself around not only seeing yourself differently, but also starting to see these larger structures around racism or even around the youth differently. So with the people that we interviewed and surveyed, we saw that there were some changes around becoming more self-aware around the issues of racial healing or structural racism. One example was the use of common terms like cotton picking, going from saying something like that, not necessarily realizing the context, the historical context, the structural context around that phrase, to now seeing that that particular phrase can have damage or can create damage for others, given that historical and oppressive structure around it. And so this kind of awareness, along with understanding and connecting more deeply with the youth, started to have impacts on them as program implementers, as library professionals, and as educators. There was also some change that we saw within the partner institutions. So the partner community institutions that completed the survey, 88% said that they would like to do this work again. They'd like to partner with this program again and continue this work. 67% said that they would like to continue racial healing work within their institution. So TRHT GSC not only was seen as a positive program for the youth, but it was also seen as a potential spark for deeper work within institutions. So we had some recommendations around this work growing and building on the successes that have happened and filling in some of the gaps. So one of the core pieces that's needed is to have a strong foundation in order to do this work and the capacity that it takes in order to complete this, complete the work in a way that yields, at the very least, the outcomes that we have already reviewed. In essence, there's time, skill, resources, personnel, and partnerships that create the foundation for the capacity. So with time, looking at, is there enough time that you have within your routine, within the potential routine that you can create within your institution to create this space to have these sessions? Is there enough time for session frequency around developing those relationships that where the youth can experience that safe space and can begin to disclose in the way that we've started to see them disclose? Also, the set of skills for working with youth directly, meeting them where they're at, engaging young people, having the facilitation skills to be able to make sure that everyone feels heard, everyone feels valued, and everyone's voice is invited into the space and ideas are invited into the space. And racial healing experience that not only can you invite people into the space, but connect their narrative with the broader narrative and connect each other across differences. Resources, of course, the books, but also program materials in working with young people. And what came out as far as effective and promising strategies were things that engaged the youth on multiple levels. So discussion, but then also arts, crafts, them being able to create in the moment. So having those kinds of materials available to do those kinds of activities. Personnel, so having or getting a diverse team where you can engage the young people in different ways. One of the realizations that some of the librarians that were interviewed had was that it was challenging to speak across ethnic group about these very difficult issues around racism, around racial healing. And having a diverse team can help to pull in people who can provide different perspectives around this. Motivation. So is there people in your institution that are also motivated to do this work? One example that came up as a potential barrier in the work was a substitute coming in to run the group. And that created some friction because that person did not necessarily share the same values of racial healing and of inclusion. So it created a disruption in the group. So just making sure that there is this motivation within your institution to do the work, or to at least start to create or generate that motivation to do the work. And that you can create space within your team to engage in some critical self-reflection around doing the racial healing work, the oftentimes difficult racial healing work that is required in this, such as looking at your implicit bias. Another aspect of capacity was around the partnerships, and that there is so much potential with the community partnerships, not only for change within their institutions, but also change within the broader community through your partnership. So one site used this as an opportunity to engage the mayor of that particular city, to engage the chief of police within her area, and they started to read the books, and then they started to understand the young people and their constituents in a different way. So thinking about what kind of strategy can be created in order to not only make this change within partnership institutions, but also catalyze change in your communities. And as a core part of this partnership, the communication was really key between the library project director and the institution. So making sure that both are on the same page and that both are in good communication throughout the process. Another piece, really a tool that you can use are these sets of questions around the capacity that you need in order to do this work well and in a sustainable way. So some of the questions that you can ask yourself in your institution are, does the site and personnel have enough time to dedicate for each session and the frequency of sessions needed to have vulnerable and deliberative dialogue around the issues, in addition to allowing students time to read the books? Do we have the right team around personality, motivation, diversity in place who should implement this model with the population of focus? Is the team motivated to develop awareness and critical consciousness, do the hard work around internal racism and implicit bias, and provide a space for young people to disclose and heal? Is this the right time for my team if the motivation is not present for those who will interact with or make decisions that could affect young people? Do at least 2 people have the skills, or at least motivation and resources to build them on our team or within our partnerships to provide trauma-informed, healing-centered facilitation? So with that, the program as is had some core components that should be kept. So in thinking about how we roll this out in the future, these are the elements that should be sustained. So the training on facilitation was found to be very helpful. The Racial Healing Circle participation was also found to be quite impactful. This is one of the ways that librarians or facilitators said that they learned even more about the students that they were serving. And the discussion questions were also helpful as a foundation for the clubs. Some pieces to add to even improve programming was around theory of change or principles. So regardless of where the program sits, the type of institution, there should be certain principles that are implemented. And then these principles can be tailored to that particular context. And so making sure that everybody is on the same page around that theory of change or around those principles, but that there's enough flexibility to be responsive to each of the contexts that are involved. That there is even deeper dialogue and understanding around the concepts that are being talked about that are focused in this program. For example, structural racism, racial healing, narrative change. So what are these things? What do they look like? What is the background around them? What are those nuances? And so having that continued dialogue and to understand these concepts. Tutelage and discussion around being an ally. As I mentioned before, there were some of the people that were interviewed that said that it was a challenge to have these real discussions across ethnic groups, given the different experiences that people had. And so deepening one's understanding and practice around what it is to be an ally and have those kinds of discussions. And also time for developing strategy. As I mentioned, one of the sites took this as an opportunity to make larger change in her city. And so taking that time to really think about what is the potential, not only within your institution, but for others. And lastly, through a collaborative process with ALA and through the evaluation findings, what was yielded was this theory of change. So the participants in TRHT, the hope is that they become powerful agents of change through using their story and their narrative to affirm human equity and experience being valued regardless of the context. So 3 core components were part of the ingredients for making this happen through this model. Human equity through storytelling. So this is where the participants and the stakeholders read books that reflect their lives and that allow for deeper understanding and analysis of the greater context, and that there's opportunity for them to be critically reflective around their own privilege for staff, that the youth are connected to things that they need as far as services, resources, and that through this there would be an enhanced awareness of social inequity. Also being valued, that all of the participants would experience being heard, being respected, and that there would be a deeper level of understanding of what they're going through and what they're coming with. And that there'd be deepened relationships in that process. And that they become powerful agents of change, that they have a change around the narrative, a sense of empowerment, and become even more self-reliant, thus becoming powerful agents of change. And that staff and other stakeholders would also have a shift in their own understanding of their role in the larger context. And through the interaction of these 3, that is how we move forward to becoming powerful agents of change, that there has to be each of these 3, and that a lot of times it can be a cycle. So in short, this has been a wonderful program that has implications not only for libraries, but cities and communities. Lainey, take it away.
Thank you, Dominica, and thank you, Alicia, for sharing all of these insights and walking us through your work. This is the first time that we've had financial support to work with an external evaluator for the Great Stories Club, and it has already been so important and so informative and meaningful. So thank you both for everything. Before we close and have time for questions, I'd like to talk for just a minute about what we at ALA are acting on in terms of what we have learned through the efforts of the pilot sites and the library workers and youth involved so far. With the national rollout, we will test the theory of change that emerged from the pilot effort. The national phase includes 70 libraries in 29 states, hosting a minimum of 280 programs, and based on the proposals that we received, they will work with thousands of young adults across the country. These grantees represent 46 public libraries, 13 school K-12 libraries, 4 academic libraries, 5 community colleges, community college libraries, 1 prison library, and 1 cultural center library. Additionally, 50 community partner organizations are participating. Those include alternative schools, youth detention centers, and other community and outreach organizations that serve young people. Thanks to the pilot effort and related recommendations, we have been able to implement a number of changes to the support that we provide for library professionals who are facilitating Great Stories Club programs. These enhancements include providing additional training in cultural contexts. Topics have included microaggressions, the racial healing methodology of TRHT, and cultural humility. Additional instruction with the support of our training partner, Everyday Democracy, in implicit bias, exclusionary practices, and working as an effective ally in this space. The streamlined reporting and evaluation process. We're very excited about the work that's just beginning in your libraries all around the country, and we're really looking forward to working and learning more with you as the project and the evaluation efforts move ahead in 2019. So with that, I would like to open things up for your questions and comments. We'll give it just a minute. Feel free to use the chat feature, or I'm sorry, I think it's the Q&A feature. No, the chat feature to present your questions. We'll keep an eye out for the next few minutes. I have somebody helpfully telling me that Gwen raised her hand. So I'll read the comments in the chat just for the purposes of the archive session from Gwen Weaver. I think that the report is outstanding and contains useful materials for everyone. Thank you, Gwen.
Yeah, thank you, Gwen, for that. And just a reminder that the full report is up on the portal and available to you. So please dive in to that, because there are resources included as far as promising strategies that can help in implementing your work in the future.
From Jocelyn Bowling-Dixon, thank you for the data and the outcomes from this report. Also appreciated the info on the offerings upcoming at ALA Annual. Thanks, Jocelyn. And Samantha, thank you for posting that link to the evaluation report. Pretty long link, but it should work for you. Well, I am not seeing any other questions or comments coming through. I know I'm happy to stick around in this space. I'm sure Dominica and Alicia are available for the next 5 minutes in case anything comes to mind. But otherwise, feel free to disconnect. We will follow up with a survey. I'm sorry, not a survey, a link to the archive should you want that. Please feel free to send any other feedback that comes to mind if you are taking a look at the written report. Or just having this information percolating in your mind, please feel free to send us your feedback, your thoughts, your questions. We would love to hear from you about this work. And with that, I suppose also I should say thank you to all of our speakers, to Dominica, Alicia, and Wendy for putting so much effort into getting this webinar together. Thank you to all of you who attended, who took the time out of your day to learn about this with us. And thank you to the evaluation staff in the Public Programs Office who have led this effort with Become. Samantha Oakley and Mary Davis Fournier from the Public Programs Office have been working on evaluation since the project began, and we thank them for their support. So I think that's it. Thank you all.